Welcome to G Fun Facts Online, where we dig into the stories shaping our world. Today, we're talking about something you might think is a bit old school, a bit industrial revolution. We're talking about steel. But this isn't your grandfather's steel industry. In a world still reeling from pandemics and shifting global power, this humble metal is back at the center of a high-stakes global chess game. Governments are stepping in, reasserting control, and signaling that the age of leaving everything to the free market might be over. So why is everyone suddenly so interested in steel again? Let's get into it. First off, let's just state the obvious. Steel is everywhere. It's not just a commodity, it's the literal backbone of our civilization. The skyscrapers that touch the clouds, the bridges that span vast rivers, the cars we drive, the trains that carry our goods, all of it depends on the strength and durability of steel. But its importance goes way beyond civilian life. Steel is absolutely critical for national security. Think about it. Naval ships, tanks, fighter jets. All of this essential military hardware requires a massive, reliable supply of high-quality steel. In an age of growing instability, being able to make your own steel is seen as a core part of being a sovereign, secure nation. Losing that ability means you're dependent on foreign countries, who might not be your friends when a crisis hits. Now, this idea of government control over steel isn't new. After World War II, countries like Britain nationalized their steel industries to rebuild their nations and maintain strategic control. But by the 80s, the thinking had flipped. State-owned industries were seen as inefficient and outdated. The solution? Privatization. Let the free market bring in capital, innovation, and efficiency. For decades, that was the dominant idea. But now, that pendulum is swinging back, hard. And we have two fascinating recent examples that show how this is playing out. First, let's head to the United Kingdom. In early 2025, the British government faced a crisis. The Scunthorpe steel plant, the very last facility in the UK that could make new steel from raw iron ore, was on the brink of closure. Its Chinese owners were struggling with financial losses. If it closed, thousands would lose their jobs, and more importantly, the UK would become the only G7 nation unable to produce its own primary steel. This set off major national security alarms, so the government took a dramatic step. It passed a special act giving it the power to take control of the plant, stating that full nationalization was a very likely option to secure its future. It was a clear message: national security is more important than market forces. Now, let's jump across the Atlantic to the United States for a different, more subtle approach. Around the same time, the US government approved the sale of the iconic US steel to Japan's Nippon Steel. But there was a catch, a groundbreaking condition. The US government was granted a golden share in the company. This doesn't mean the government owns the company. Instead, this golden share gives the US president a powerful veto over the company's biggest decisions, like major investments, or who they can sell the company to in the future. It's a clever modern way to maintain control over a strategic asset without the headache and cost of actually owning it. So what's driving this new steel nationalism? Three big things. First, the return of protectionism. We've seen a wave of trade tariffs and disputes, making countries nervous about relying on imports. Producing steel at home is seen as a shield against global trade wars. Second, the pandemic brutally exposed how fragile our global supply chains are. Countries realized that access to essential materials could be cut off or even used as a weapon, prompting them to bring production closer to home. And third, there's the dragon in the room: China. China produces over half of the world's steel. This gives it immense market power and geopolitical leverage. For Western nations, the idea of being dependent on a strategic competitor for something as fundamental as steel is a major concern, and it's pushing them to rebuild their own capabilities. Of course, taking control of an industry like steel is a double-edged sword. On one hand, proponents say it saves jobs, protects critical skills, and guarantees a supply for national defense. It can also direct investment towards greener, more sustainable steel production. But the history of nationalized industries is full of cautionary tales. Critics point out the huge financial burden on taxpayers, who have to cover losses. State-owned companies can become inefficient, bogged down by politics, and slow to innovate. The risk is that you're just moving the financial losses from a private company's books to the public's, without fixing the real problems. So, what does this all mean? The moves by the UK and the US aren't just isolated decisions about one industry. They are powerful symbols of a new era. An era where geoeconomics, using economic power to achieve political goals, is taking over from the old rules of globalization. As nations compete in a more uncertain world, the fight for control over critical resources like steel is only going to intensify. The future of this industry is being forged not just in the fire of furnaces, but in the halls of power, as governments decide some things are just too important to leave to chance. Thanks for listening to G Fun Facts Online.